So the other day I was watching an interesting political debate on the issue of abortion between Destiny and a couple of women. I forget what their names were. It was on the Whatever podcast, which is a very popular podcast. I'm sure most of you have heard of it. But in that debate, I didn't watch the entire thing, but Destiny's opening statement, he was on the pro-choice side. He basically said that life should be defined by having a state of consciousness, and that he does support a ban on abortion when it's around 20 to 24 weeks, basically whenever the fetus has developed consciousness. And that really is a very interesting thing. That's something you hear a lot from pro-choice advocates, is that, yeah, when the fetus is first developing, even though it's going to eventually turn into a life in heavy air quotes, because scientifically it already is a life at the point of conception, but they believe in life as a more philosophical thing than a scientific thing, which is funny because the Democratic Party often espouse themselves as the party of science whenever you're talking about issues of climate or religion. But with abortion, they just throw science completely out the door and come up with these arbitrary concepts that have no basis in reality and also make no sense because, the state of consciousness, being aware of oneself, that's why humans are considered on a higher level than animals. That's why you're not considered a murderer when you kill a fly or a wasp in your house, and even killing a bear or killing a deer, which a lot of animal rights people have a problem with. But at the end of the day, you're not considered a murderer on the same level as if you actually killed a human. Then you'd be in jail and you'd serve the rest of your life in prison, assuming the justice system actually does its job. So we do have this understanding that human life is on a higher level than all other life on Earth. It's just because of our higher capacity of thinking and how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive the world, which pretty much every animal on Earth can't really do. So, okay, I can get behind that. But when you talk about consciousness being the criterion for whether or not a fetus is a life worth preservation, then I start to have some serious issues. I mean, you guys know that I'm pro-life, and of course, any pro-choice argument I'm going to have an issue with, but this one just makes the least amount of sense, aside from the viability criterion, which I'll talk about in a separate video. But, on the issue of consciousness, just think about this for a second, okay? I'm going to give a hypothetical scenario, but it's not really outside the realm of possibility. It's something that is very likely to happen within all of our lifetimes. Even if you're like 60 years old, it probably is something that's going to happen in your lifetime. That artificial intelligence is very likely in the near future to develop consciousness the way that we humans have it. They could think independently on their own. We already kind of see that, but imagine into the future where a robot, an AI, whatever you want to refer to it, is completely indistinguishable from a human being in almost every way imaginable. The way that they think, the way that they show emotions, fear, anger, happiness, all that stuff. And they can even do other human things like take a shit. They can, they can have sex. They could do all that stuff. Like, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a human and an AI. But even if they're not human flesh, like if you can't tell, like if you can still tell the difference and they're all just a bunch of nuts and bolts and stuff, they can still develop a state of consciousness. It is very, very much possible that an AI can be conscious, a lot more than any animals on Earth. And yeah, on the same level, and maybe even on a higher level than any human could possibly be. Like I said, we're already starting to see it. So I think the point I'm trying to get at is that if consciousness is the thing that defines life and makes it okay to abort fetuses before a certain point, before they develop a state of consciousness, then an abortionist will have to prioritize the life of the artificial intelligence over the life of a fetus before the 20-week period where the fetus will develop consciousness. And you see where the problem lies, is that you have complete disregard for human life. Well, of course, the abortionist is going to say, oh, no, but that's different. Somehow they'll try to come up with some reason why that's different. But you just said that consciousness is the thing that makes that defines a meaningful life or a life worth preservation. Oh, but it's artificial life, it's not real life. But if you can't tell the difference, does it really matter? It's like Fallout 4 with the synths. That was a whole philosophical debate during the entire game. And most people, most of the players of that game thought that killing synths was wrong, and that if they're indistinguishable from humans, then you should leave them alone and they should be able to live their lives. Same thing with Detroit Become Human. That was another game that really did a good job exploring the topic of artificial intelligence and their relationship with humans and how that all plays out. And it was a similar concept where AI was advanced, actually beyond what humans were, and they obviously had a state of consciousness. So, yeah. So you would have to prioritize the life of the AI over the life of an actual human being. And I personally have a serious problem with that for obvious reasons. Because if you're going to say, if you're an abortion advocate and you're going to say, well, that's not fair because human life is on a different level. Like, human life is different from artificial life because we're flesh and bone, we're flesh and blood, and we're created by biology, they're created by machine. Well, my counterpoint would be a very simple one. The process in which human beings are created, you want to completely undermine that and allow those human beings to be killed when it's below a certain point in time. So I would say that you can't say that human life is more important than AI life, but then also say you want abortions to be completely unlimited for fetuses because they're not considered a life if they have not yet reached the state of consciousness and self-awareness. They're not developed enough. You see where there's a huge problem with that? Makes absolutely no sense at all. Because you would have to think that machines are more valuable than human beings. And maybe, in this future that will happen at some point, there probably will be a lot of people that think machines are more important than humans. I mean, there are people that think that dogs are more important than humans. Like, they'll have a dog, and they'll love the dog more than their own children. They'll love the dog more than anyone in their family and their friends or whoever. So we already are kind of seeing that with certain groups of people, with other things. But yeah, it's like, human beings are created through a biological process in which life is created. But it is a biological thing. Well, biologically speaking, life begins at conception. So, yeah, I don't understand. Well, it's like, it really just shows that they don't have any strong arguments. They rely on arbitrary concepts that can easily be refuted and challenged instead of the actual hard facts of science. So, yeah, I'm a pro-life atheist. I believe in the science that life begins at conception, and that's why I am very pro-life, and I support pretty much any laws that restrict abortion aside from the life of the mother. That's pretty much the only exception that I believe in. Otherwise, you're killing an innocent life, and I do not find that acceptable at all.